The diagram you see right now is a screen capture from a KNKL video. I will highly recommend the channel if you are interested to learn more about character and prop design. Anyway, for this diagram, you can see how the artist has broken down the stages of drawing the human figure into 6 stages. Stage 1 is what we are very familiar with, the Stickman. I'm sure everyone started by drawing Stickmans. The second stage is where you introduce a little bit more joints into the Stickman. By having all these additional joints, the Stickman is able to perform a wider range of motion and strike a wider range of poses. Stage 3 is, if you have been following the video so far, you should be at stage 3 where you are able to deconstruct the human body. But Jason, since we have already learned how to taper the geometrical forms and even insert in muscular forms, shouldn't we be in stage 4 and stage 5? Well, to actually reach stage 4, I think there is a very important element that we have still yet to cover, in which we will do so in this video, and that is gesture. Before we move on to gesture, however, I just want to point out one additional concept that I failed to explain more in detail in the previous video, and that concept is of foreshortening. It sounds like a big word, but actually it simply means the human figure in perspective. So this is extremely prevalent when you are drawing your human characters in different poses. For example, you have a mage over here that is casting a spell towards the camera, towards the audience, and the mage is kind of placing the hand in front of the character's body. And because of that, right, because of how perspective works, the length of the entire arm is kind of compressed and it looks shorter than it should be. If you deconstruct the arm, it looks something like this. You can see how the knowledge of being able to draw cylindrical shapes in perspective can help you when it comes to applying the concept of foreshortening. Mastering human anatomy is one of the most important skill set that an artist can have, especially he or she is interested to do character design or character illustration work in the future. But let me ask you one question. Why does this stylized Disney drawing, this sketch, evoke so much more life as compared to the accurate anatomical drawing on the right hand side? Well, there are a couple of reasons, and one of them being line weight. But the biggest difference, in my opinion, is gesture. The human body is one of the most beautiful things to look at. We are capable of expressing emotions simply based on our body postures. As artists, it is important to learn to observe the human form and question why. Like, why do we slouch when we feel sad or disappointed? Why do we stand straight when we feel confident? A gesture drawing is basically a quick drawing that captures the essential action and feeling of a subject in its most distilled and simplified form. The two fundamental concepts of gestures are the line of action and balance. The line of action is an imaginary line that extends through the main action of the character. The balance simply means whether the character is standing in a stable or unstable position. Note that balance does not mean that the pose has to be symmetrical. In fact, avoiding symmetry is one of the key aspects of making your pose feel a bit more interesting. Another thing to note is that you do not have to ensure that the character is in balance at all times. Take for instance this pose of the character throwing a punch forward. Strictly speaking, this character is not in balance. He is tilting towards one side and almost falling over. However, this makes sense and it sells on the impact and power of the punch that he is throwing, and therefore it is a successful pose. In most cases, however, when you are trying to depict a character just standing at a resting position, the trick of getting a nice pose is to push and exaggerate the line of action but still maintain the character's balance. A simple way to achieve this is by using an age-old Italian concept of contrapposto. Contrapposto is an Italian term which means an asymmetrical arrangement of the human figure where the weight is shifted on one leg and the shoulder and hips are angled in a non-parallel manner. In this example, you can see that my pose is more interesting in contrapposto as compared to the more static and symmetrical pose. Do take note that by shifting my weight to one of my foot, I am alternating my shoulder line and my hip line. Therefore, as a rule of thumb, avoid drawing the shoulder and the hips as parallel lines. In this series of demos, I will be showing you how I would draw a male and female figure in both the resting and action pose. I would typically start with the gesture first, and you can see how similar the gesture lines are to the Stickman that everyone is familiar with. But the only difference is that instead of using straight lines, I am using curves to denote the gesture and action of the pose. While not really highlighted over here, I want to bring your attention to the shoulder and the hip line of the character of this person, this photo reference over here. You can see how even at rest, the direction of the shoulder line is different from the direction of the hip line. They are not in parallel. So please take note of that. Once the gesture is drawn, I can then overlay it with my deconstructed figure. And once the deconstruction is done, I can then apply the muscle mass on top of it. While this job sheet will be mainly focusing on the figure as a whole, do take this opportunity to practice your human portrait drawing as well. Try to recap on the human face proportions and draw a somewhat believable human face. Once again, you do not need to shade for this particular job sheet. One thing that I have not mentioned so far is the key difference between a male and a female body. Of course, anatomically, there are certain very obvious differences, like how the female have larger breasts and of course the genitalia differences. But I want to point out one main difference that a lot of people tend to forget about. So when drawing the male figure, especially if you are drawing a slightly more muscular, kind of heroic character, you want to emphasize the shoulders. In fact, the silhouette or the shape of the male character should look something like this, where it is very top heavy. In fact, if you look at some of the swimmers out there, Michael Phelps, he has this ginormous shoulders that really brings out the muscularity in him. As for females, a lot of artists tend to overemphasize the breast, and I think that it is a mistake to do so. And the main reason is because you would want to emphasize the hips a bit more. So in contrast to the male silhouette, which has this inverted triangle, the female silhouette has this triangular shape that kind of has its base at where the hips are. The reason why we find this to be, I guess, appealing is purely because of evolution, right? When you want to find a mate, as a caveman, like how do you assess whether the male partner is a competent one? Of course, we look for broad shoulders, we look for muscles to see if this person is fit. As for the female, for males, we would it's ingrained in our biology that we look for female partners who are able to procreate, to be able to bear kids, and the main features that we look for are actually the hips. Okay, the next drawing would be the female body at a resting pose. As with the previous demo, I am starting with a gesture, the line of action that extends from the top of the body all the way to the bottom. And once the line is established, I would block in the deconstructed form. When drawing the limbs, once again take note of the alternating lines. In this case, I kind of overemphasize on the hips, and right now I'm trying to tone it down. For this particular exercise, we are trying to stay as faithful to the reference image as possible, so I would avoid any form of stylization of the figure. Okay, once the deconstructed form is out, I can build upon the muscular mass on top of this rough drawing. If you are using traditional media for this job sheet, just try to keep your deconstruction lines to be light so that you can erase them easily later on. Okay, I noticed that during the deconstruction phase, I drew the shoulders to be a little bit too wide. I'm gonna try to keep the length shorter to make her look a bit more feminine. Once again, ideally, I should be drawing from a nude reference, but I think YouTube will block the video if I have a naked photo. If I include a naked photo of a female or male body. One tip for drawing the toes is that I will draw in the big toe first, and then I will draw a line in between at the halfway point of the 4 toes, and then I will divide it accordingly. Okay, for the female body, I try not to draw too much of the abs. I think it makes her look a little bit more masculine if I include too many details in the abdominal area. Okay, in this next demo, I will be drawing the male figure in an action pose. Similarly, I am starting with the line of action and then blocking the deconstructed human figure on top of the line. In an action pose like this, sometimes it might be a little bit more difficult to take note of the shoulder and the hip lines. But since the reference image, the guy is wearing an underwear, you can kind of see it quite easily. So I'm sure by now you would have noticed for most of the drawings that I do, I try to plan beforehand, like plan the amount of space required for each element before I fill in the details. This is a very important thing to take note, especially when you're working on more complicated scenes in the future. You really want to make sure that you nail the planning stage so that the amount of revisions that you need to go through is kept at the minimal. And the simple reason is because it's much easier to shift around certain things. It doesn't hurt to erase and redraw certain elements when it's at such a very rough stage. Imagine you have already rendered the image, but something is off. Maybe the hands are too small, maybe the angle of the face is not right. You will be more reluctant to make any sort of changes at that stage. So this process of planting the line of action, drawing the gesture, doing the deconstruction before the detailing starts should be observed even in shorter poses that you will draw in the future. In the coming weeks, we will be doing shorter kind of gestural sketches where each drawing can take anywhere from 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute, even 30 seconds. When it comes to 30-second drawings, most likely you will be doing just the gesture. But the idea is that you capture the essence of the characters' actions and emotion in that pose, in that 30 seconds. You can see over here how the pectorals, the chest, is connected to the deltoids, the shoulder muscles. And how the bicep is actually flowing below that nest, below the deltoids. For this pose, you really have to observe the balance of the character, of the reference. If you draw the hand a little bit too far to the right hand side, you'll see that he's toppling over to the right. Alright, in the final demo, I will be drawing the female body, the female figure in an action pose. Start with the line of action, and then the deconstructed form on top of it. I will also indicate the shoulder and the hip line. So I specifically chose this example to demo because there is a fair amount of foreshortening involved, especially with her leg. And you can see how I am using the deconstruction approach to help me to tackle this tricky foreshortening that I see over here. While drawing this, I realized that I've placed my head to be a little bit too high up the canvas, so I'm erasing everything and shifting it downwards. There is a little bit of foreshortening on her back hand, on her back arm, but it's not as prominent as the leg. Okay, when I'm drawing, I'm constantly comparing the location of all the different elements. For example, right now I'm comparing where the buttocks will end as compared to her left hand. That left hand juts out slightly further to the right of the canvas compared to her buttocks. Once the deconstruction phase is done, I will start to apply more details, add in a muscular mass, add in facial features. I noticed that during the initial blocking phase, my hand I allocated too much space for the hand, so I'm kind of making it smaller in my final drawing. Notice when I draw the leg how I'm using overlapping curves like this, like what you can see from the calf. It's not a continuous line from the calf all the way up the thighs and to the buttocks. I'm actually using two separate lines, and I'm overlapping the curve on the calves to indicate that the calf is in front of the thighs, at least in this camera angle. Using overlapping lines like this is very good to denote foreshortening, to show perspective. Once again, I am using this same principle for the ankles on the back leg, on the back foot, if you can see. So that's one of the powerful things about a simple line like this. It can denote depth in your drawing. So in this photo, her back hand is striking a very weird looking pose. I'm not sure which finger is that pointing out. It might be the thumb actually, but I changed up the pose slightly. So just as a summary, my usual process when it comes to drawing the human figure will be to, number one, start off by drawing the line of action. Next, I would try to find the shoulder and the hip lines. Ideally, they should be alternating. They should be in a different angle. Next, I would draw the deconstructed human figure on top of this line of action. Next, I will build the muscular mass on top of this deconstructed form. I would also add in facial features to make my drawing complete. This process can be applied no matter how long you are given for each human figure drawing. Whether it's 10 minutes, 5 minutes, 1 minute, 30 seconds, you should be using this approach. For your homework today, you are tasked to do 4 human figure drawings. 2 of the drawings will be based off drawings done by other artists. This process is similar to how we practice drawing the human head. For the next 2 figure drawings, you are required to reference from 2 photos. Here, I will give you the liberty to choose between the nude option or the non-nude option based on your own comfort. For these images, I will not share it over here because once again, I think YouTube will remove my video if it contains any form of nudity. You can look at the images in the Google folder in the video description below.